Hey Jason, I'm glad you're joining us for interview at the Startup Noodle. I'm very excited as this is the first interview we're having, and we had many people asking to have interviews with entrepreneurs in China. So I'm glad you're the first one.
Thank you.
So,
I'm honored to be the first one.
so Jason, you told me, I mean, from your accent, I can tell that you're from Australia, and you told me about your journey coming from Australia to China a while ago, and I had the same journey coming from Israel to China, and I wonder what is the environment like in Australia, and what make you decide that you want to arrive here as an entrepreneur.
Okay, so yeah, coming from Sydney, the environment I feel was very. I mean, Australia's a great place to live. Sydney is, I think, one of the top places to live in the world, actually. But because of that comfort, it's actually almost too easy. So I think a lot of people in Australia get complacent about challenging themselves to do things that are extraordinary. Um, so Australia as a whole is really nice, but the downsides, which is almost, um, which I guess is a catch-22, but it's a bit slow, um,
Hmm.
and the economy is just it's quite slow and small, so things don't change that much. Every time I go back to Australia, um, things are always the same. People are doing the same things. Nothing really changes
Hmm.
that much. And this really causes everyone else to act slowly as well, and no one's really pushed to do anything. So, and wanting to do a startup or become an entrepreneur, I felt like I needed an environment where other people were as motivated and active um, around me, so that it would push me to do certain things. And of course, coming to China, where the market is obviously massive and growing much faster than Australia, I felt like China was um, at least an interesting place to experiment with for startups.
Did you have any thought about going to America, Silicon Valley, or any other places? I know that recently there was a research saying that also Los Angeles is at the top three, I think, for entrepreneurs. So I wonder about that.
I never really considered America, although from TechNerd, I used to write about the Silicon Valley a lot, but I actually never been there. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, I never really considered America, mainly because I originally came to China to study Chinese at Tsinghua for a semester. And then I felt the energy, I think, in Beijing already. And I already knew that, China was probably the, at least the growth engine of the world, and still is, but especially more so back then when, America was kind of tanking in about 2009, 2010. Um, yeah, and I just felt China was a really interesting place to be. So yeah, I never really considered America, but potentially maybe later on. We'll see what happens.
How, how long are you here now?
So in total, I've been in China for nearly 3 years, including the time I studied in Tsinghua.
Uh-huh. Okay. Can you tell me some about the preparation you made? I mean, you collect information about the environment. What are the things you do before you actually arrive? I mean, you had your probably your experience because you were at Tsinghua, but then making actually a move and for living and not just for studying for a semester is probably very different.
Sure. I guess my story is kind of interesting. I didn't necessarily pack my bags up and just decide to move here and figure out what to do. So the way it happened was that before I left China the first time after studying, I met I met a friend through another friend. His name was David Liu of he's a co-founder of Japan. So Japan is the Foursquare of China. So before I left, I met him, and he was, I guess, he was an American Chinese entrepreneur in China.
Hmm.
So I met up with him, chatted to him about the whole experience about he moved from Taipei to Beijing to do a startup. So when I went back to Australia, we kept in touch, Skype over email, stuff like that. And then when I was in Australia, I was considering, coming back to China and I wanted to get into startups. So I basically asked him if there's any opportunity to work with him in one of his startups. So after maybe 2 months of hard thinking, it was a big decision. I mean, back then it seemed like a really big decision, but now it seems like a decision that was made pretty easily. But essentially, yeah, he said, yeah, there's an opportunity to work in a sister startup of ours called Apps Connect. So he offered me basically this, I guess you could say an internship for a few months just to try it out. So he said, yeah, come over for a few months, see if you like it. If not, then that's fine, nothing lost. You get some experience, you get to see what it's like to operate in a Chinese startup. So basically I said, yeah, eventually I said, yes, I'll do it. So in preparation to come here, I didn't really prepare that much. I mean, he already said that I could sleep on his couch, so I slept on his couch for like the first month and a half. When I got to Beijing, like most startup people do. But he had a really nice place, but I slept on his couch for a month and a half, so the accommodation's kind of set. In terms of money, I mean, it was kind of was an internship, so he paid me like a very little amount, just a stipend to survive, which was enough. And besides that, I mean, I could speak a bit of Chinese from before I got, from when I was studying at Tsinghua. And yeah, the rest was just coming to explore and coming to try new things. And I think, coming to China was a big learning experience because I was originally in the corporate world doing consulting. So that was a big change, and I think that's something I had to eventually adapt my mind to in coming to China and do a startup.
I understand. But when you arrive here, it's not that you suddenly know everyone, and I can tell, especially for me, it takes time until you know the right people, and of course getting into the startup scene anywhere, but also here in Beijing. And I wonder what were your steps, or what exactly you've done to get to know people and get into that, and bringing you to where you are now with Koombah.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in terms of getting to the right circles of entrepreneurs and startups in Beijing, I think it's actually quite easy. When I originally came, so I was doing App Store Connect for about 3 months, doing business development, basically trying to get apps into the HTC App Store in China. So already through that work, I was meeting Chinese startups, doing mobile apps. And then through David, actually, David's very connected in the whole startup community, so I started going to a lot of events with him. He started introducing me to a lot of people in the VC, in the venture capital world, also other entrepreneurs doing cool things. So just from him, I got to learn and meet a ton of people, which was a great starting point. And then started going to a lot of events, a lot of startup weekend type of things, iWeekend. But I guess really where it hit the trajectory went much higher was that I started doing TechNode. So as you know about TechNode, it's basically like the Chinese TechCrunch.
Yeah.
So as the main English editor, I got to interview, got to meet tons of people very quickly. So I met a lot of entrepreneurs, both on the Chinese and foreigner side, also within China, and also people sitting in other countries like in America or in Europe or Asia. So I got to travel around different countries, and I met a lot of startup people in like Taiwan, in Seoul, Korea, in Hong Kong. Yeah, and that was a really good networking experience. In China itself, yeah, I went to a lot more events. iWeekend, Setup Weekend, China ICT, GMIC, Global Mobile Internet Conference. TechNode ourselves, we did a lot of our own events. So we organized a lot of startup pitching events. We did a lot of salons. we also did very big events for like China Bang,
Yeah.
and also SLP, Startup Leadership Program. So
Well, events.
as
I
you're
think events
as
in the
you're a
last
fellow
year.
in the new group, sorry.
I think events in the last year here in Beijing are booming. It's crazy.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, there's definitely no shortage of events that you can attend, and that's really how I started to network. And I pretty much, I mean, at least on the foreigner entrepreneur side, I've interviewed many of them already. So just interviewing and talking, building relationships and friendships, and
Hmm.
I mean, we all go to the same events. We're all trying to do the same thing, so we have that common bond. And that's really how I've been able to at least um, build a network in Beijing.
Yeah, I also feel it's very, very supportive here.
Yeah,
Um, can you tell me some about Koombah? I mean, was that an idea that you came with from Australia on on the trip after your semester in Tsinghua, or it came here from your co-founders? Tell me about the process.
yeah. So with Koombah, basically what happened was I didn't start with the idea from China, from Australia. I basically got to China and it came out of just living here. So this backstory is that in 2011, around May 2011, I went to an iWeekend event.
Hmm.
An iWeekend is basically a 2-day. You pitch your idea, you attract a team, you build a demo, a prototype, and you present it on the Sunday of the weekend. Um, so basically, I thought, okay, I want to try and do an idea. I'm trying to pitch a startup and see what happens.
Hmm.
Um, so I started thinking about problems that I thought were very big and very challenging to solve, but very important. Um, so I think back then I just had moved out of David's couch and had to look for an apartment. Um, and I realized that the process, experience of finding an apartment in Beijing was extremely difficult. Going through property agents is very difficult. They're all basically trying to rip me off, lying, telling me things that weren't true. And then going on websites. Websites were equally as bad with fake information. Nothing was true. It was all used as a bait and switch tactic. So essentially, I went to iWeekend and I wanted to do. I actually originally wanted to do an augmented mobile reality app um, that essentially, when you point your phone at a building, it would tell you, which rooms were available, how much the average rent was,
That's cool.
stuff like that. Um, And the real goal for that was trying to disintermediate like agents and try and get rid of property agents from the market.
Hmm.
So I actually went to the iWeekend event and I proposed that I wanted to kill all the agents. And I think that's why I got through people who equally hated agents as much as I did, so they voted me in. Um,
The bond.
but then during the weekend, the idea, mainly because there's no way I could have built that augmented reality app in a weekend.
Yes.
So we then decided to think about other more simple problems in the same real estate market. And with my team, we basically decided to change it to a social roommate matching website.
Hmm.
Basically trying to match people together based on similar interests or mutual friends, stuff like that, just to live together in different cities around the world,
Yeah.
but more so for China. Um, so that's what we worked on. I actually worked on that idea for a few months. But then as I was doing that kind of by myself and maybe with one or two people helping out, I kind of realized that that market was just too small. I mean, it's a very interesting, I think, project,
Hmm.
and it'll help a lot of people.
Yes.
But in terms of turning it into a business, it probably was not the right move.
Hmm.
So then we kind of, sat back and thought about it again, did more research, and decided to focus on the total rent market instead. But then going down the niche of foreigners, trying to service foreigners first, because myself coming from Australia, and then I was talking to my co-founder Andrew at the time. He's from America,
Yeah.
so we decided that okay, instead of going after the roommate matching business, we try and just focus on the real residential rent market instead. So then we decided, okay, let's try and help people. Let's try and make the market more trustworthy. So we decided that we would act as consultants at least at the start and try and help foreigners find housing in a smooth and efficient process. So this meant essentially really clearly understanding the client's requirements, where they're coming from, what their standards, expectations are, all that type of stuff.
This is not
And then,
necessarily only for Beijing, of course.
yeah, so the goal eventually is to expand it a lot to much larger geographic region. So probably eventually hit tier 1, 2 cities, tier 2 cities, but that's really for a different product that we're thinking about. But at least at the start, we're thinking more of a service business that would help foreigners find housing in Beijing.
How did you meet your co-founders? Are they from our weekend or something that evolved?
Yeah, so through TechNode, I organized an event, basically in Koombah, just a really casual event, and my co-founder Andrew, he came as a guest pretty much. He signed up for my thing, and I remember when I saw his email, he said, Andrew at it was basically Andrew at MIT alumni or something like that. And so that was pretty impressive. So I wanted to talk to him at the event. So he came along and I chatted to him, and then essentially we kept in touch. And he said he'd done a few startups in the States. So I wanted to, and as I was starting this whole search for roommate matching website at the start, I wanted to get some feedback and learn from him and some advice. Yeah, so that's essentially how I met him, through actually an event I created at TechNode. And then we kept in touch, after the event, just chatting to him about what I was doing. And he actually, felt very strongly about the problem as well, because he's been through the whole,
he had the same problem.
apartment. Yeah, you have to go through it because, everyone's renting here, especially if you're a foreigner, right? So he felt he felt the problem very acutely too. So eventually, things went on, and he decided to join me full time and do the startup.
It's you and Andrew, but there are two more, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right. So there's also my roommate Stan. He's also working with us. So Stan was a friend of a friend, and he approached me pretty much in late 2011. And he said that he thought this was an interesting idea, and that he could he wanted to contribute and help and see if this could he could make this work too. The other guy, Max, he's a local Chinese guy. So Max, he basically met Andrew at our church event. So he met Andrew, and then he had just come back from the States after he was doing his MBA at Cornell. So he wanted to get into the whole startup scene, and we kind of always knew we needed like a local Chinese guy to make things much easier. So yeah, he decided to join eventually too, and probably not during this year.
I really want to, because you're very experienced here and already 3 years, I think, as you said, and I want you to maybe think about a tip or something that you can tell entrepreneurs who already here in China or about to come here and consider that, as many people want to come here, and the thing they need to check, making the landing softer for them, because moving to a new place is very, very hard sometimes, and it can be very challenging, and people need the support, and I'm trying to think of ways of how to help them. And what are your tips for that, so they have a softer landing?
That's a big question. I think for entrepreneurs coming to China, I think probably the first thing that is worth doing is really taking the time to really understand China. You know, I've seen many entrepreneurs and talked to many people and I've heard many stories where, you know, people will come here and they'll just assume that they can do things the way they did it back home in America or Europe or Australia. And I think many people are quickly learning that they can't do that anymore, but I think it's really to not rush into things too quickly, but to really understand the culture, especially if you're doing a startup that is focused on the Chinese local market. I mean, if you're doing something that's focused on the foreign market, it's probably, I mean, you can do like a bar or restaurant, but that's not really a startup. But essentially, you still have to understand the culture of doing business with your suppliers. You know, even for Koombah, we work with some local Chinese agents. We work with some Chinese landlords. We still have to understand how they do things, how they think about things, how they communicate. So it's really, I think the first thing is to be, I guess like many people have told me, is to be humble about, you know, adapting and learning about China. I mean, there's always things that you want to change and you think like, why does this happen? I can't believe this. This is ridiculous. You know, this sucks. But it's the way things are, and you've got to try and adapt to that. If you can sell the problem you're trying to solve and maybe even turn it into like, you know, make it resonate with those people, they're more likely to, I think, want to join you based on, you know, nothing. You've got nothing else but this idea, but this, I guess, passion to do something. So you really got to use whatever you can, like an entrepreneur, and scrap around for whatever resources you can to try and build this team around you. And at the start, as an entrepreneur, it's probably mostly based on your idea and vision, especially if people don't know you. If you don't have a track record, you know, it's very difficult to get the investment, get the team to start rolling. So, you know, start with an idea and a passion that you can, I guess, instill in other people to join you in your quest, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Jason, thank you so much for joining at this interview. It was very insightful, and I'm sure people are going to like it. And I wish you a lot of success with Koombah. I hope it's going to grow not only to Beijing, but for other places as well. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Loma. Okay, see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.